Perfect. So good evening, everyone, and thank you as always. Good to see you all. So we're learning the Gemara of Rav Acha bar Avira, Haiman the Shot of Sichsolatana, and I think last year on Sunday we discussed Shittas Rashi, the view of Rashi as we have him. It would appear that the melacha is the melacha of Rashi says it's the melachot of bishul because when you throw the peg into the oven, it initially is softened, and that shitta anyway at least is explicit in the Meiri. The Meiri spells this out very clearly. I think I printed the Meiri on the. I definitely meant to print the Meiri on the handout sheets on the Mara Makonos. That yes, I did. I printed the Meiri on the Mara Makonos. The Meiri says. The water, what happens is the heat draws out the water from the wood, and that causes the wood initially to soften. And ripuyov huloka in bishul, it's the ripuy, it's the softening of the wood, which is the bishul. So this is the first malach in the sugya. Now that's one shot in the sugya. The second way of learning the sugya is found in Rashi on the Rif. Last year I discussed the history of Rashi on the Rif, so I'm not going to go through that again. But effectively we end up with, for all intents and purposes, another shitta of the Rishonim. So whether we call this the view of Rashi because the Rashi on the Rif was based on an alternative manuscript in Rashi, or whether it's some anonymous Talmud Chacham in the 13th century in Germany who understood Rashi that way, or for whatever reason, but somehow out of the base of Medrash of the yeshivas in Germany, where they used to learn Rashi and learn him on the Rif, and they wrote this kitzah of Rashi, they came up with this Peshat. And let's have a look at Rashi on the Rif, the language of Rashi on the Rif, which I printed in the source sheet. Rashi says, the shot of sichsa, they threw a peg, shehishlich yoseid lach latano, cham liyavsho. They threw a wet peg into a hot oven in order to dry it. Now in Rashi, in the Gemara, Rashi says sheyiskashe, in order that it should harden. Rashi on the Rif doesn't mention the sheyiskashe. He doesn't mention anything about the aim being that it should harden. Then we get to the next Rashi on the Rif. Demir parafi, because it softens. Al yedei chom ha'or, through the heat of the flame. V'amayim shebesoichai chamin. So Rashi says the mayim shebesoichai chamin. In Rashi on the Gemara, it says yotzin, that they go out. Rashi on the Rif says the water becomes hot. Rashi on the Gemara says the water goes out. And he carries on. Ula'acha sheyotsu meimov, after the water goes out, comet, it becomes shriveled, and v'chiropi bereisha havi Mevashel, and therefore when it becomes soft in the beginning, that's Mevashel. Rashi on the Gemara says that's its bishuloi, that's its bishul. So there's several changes in the Rashi and the Rif vis-a-vis the Rashi on the Gemara, and the sum totality of the changes that Rashi and the Rif is learning that the bishul is the water as opposed to the softening of the wooden peg. And therefore we have here effectively a second pshat in the sugya, that the bishul that's going on in answer to the Gemara is the water. So the mere parafi of the Gemara simply means that the word softens by excusing water, by giving off water, and then the water's nispashel, and that's the malacha over here. Now, in the physics, if you like, of what's going on, this is a perfectly tenable pshat. The wood gives off water, the water is extracted, and then the water gets boiled, not just boiled, but boiled away, and that's the bishul that is taking place over here. And Rashi, it's clear that this is what Rashi in the Rif says. He says, the water inside it becomes cham. It's not that the water is yotzim, but that the water is heated. And this is indicated by the subtle changes that were made in the language of Rashi. He doesn't say v'chirofi reisha havi bishuloi. He doesn't say when it becomes soft in the beginning, that's its bishul, but that's the bishul. In other words, the bishul of the water as opposed to the bishul of the stick through softening the stick. So this is the view of Rashi, and the chiddush is that evaporating water is called bishul. Is this how everyone learnt Rashi?
Is it a difficult read in the Gemara though? Because it's the Gemara doesn't say else, because the water gets hot and that's your bishul right there. It says, oh no, it gets softer. So we have to reinterpret softer and that's caused by the heating of the water, which is
correct. That's what Rashi and the Rif says. Yes.
Yeah, but Rashi and the Rif wouldn't it have to say to follow the view which you expressed? It would have to say mitchamem. You're saying that's getting hot, but it's just simply saying that the water inside is hot, and after that water's gone out, then it contracts. But because the wood itself gets softer, that's called Mevashel. Just translate.
Right, Rashi doesn't mention that though. Rashi just says, Rashi seems to explain that the point is that through the Chom Ha'or, the water is hot.
Is hot, yes. The water is hot, but it's not implying that the heating of the water. It doesn't seem to me that the wording implies that the heating of the water is Mevashel. I can't really see that in the structure of the.
It's not. I can't prove it to you, but it seems to me the easiest reading in Rashi, because Rashi emphasizes that the water is cooked, and there's several subtle changes in the language of Rashi on the Rif as opposed to our Rashi. He doesn't say that.
I won't go on, but I'll just simply say I can't see where it says that the water is cooked. I can simply say that the water is hot.
Right, but we know that heating water is a type of bishul.
Yeah, no, I'm with that. Yeah.
And therefore, the chiddush of Rashi is that evaporating water goes through a bishul stage. That seems to me why he mentions that the water is hot. Otherwise, why is it relevant that the water is hot? The point is the water, as he said in our version, the water goes out, and therefore the wood softens and shrivels.
Maybe.
And it seems to me also the last words of Rashi, he says having Mevashel as opposed to having Bishuloi, again means it's not its Bishul, as in the wood's Bishul, but it's Mevashel because it's the Mevashel of the water. It seems to me a tenable reading in Rashi, a good reading in Rashi. Josh, just to address your point, you're right. I mean, if this reading is correct, then the point that the svara is not that the wood is mirparapi. The point is that the wood's softening is because the water's boiling, and therefore the bishul really is the water, not the wood.
How would we learn the Havamin of the Gemara then? According to Rashi on the Rif, why would we think Ma'ad the same in the Shurim and on Chavin?
This is anyway a question. I mean, whether you go like Rashi on the Rif or not, and whether I'm right or Paul's right, and whatever Rashi is saying on the Rif, well, now that we've seen this Rashi, it opens a question, which is why aren't you chayav for cooking the water?
But the Gemara itself talks about miskasher. If we're saying it's on the water and it's got nothing to do with miskasher, why does the Gemara talk about Ma'ad saying that it may be miskasher?
No, the Havamina was that you're potter because maybe something like this is only a temporary step, because the ultimate aim is to harden the wood. You don't really care about the water boiling.
Isn't that the Havamina in the second?
That there's a bishul of the water.
Isn't that the Havamina in the second case? L'shure, Rashi on the daf said lechazek, and that's his. And it's lechazek. It's not to do with a temporary. It's because we thought it was that his intention was just to be lechazek, and then the answer to the Gemara is mirparofi, is to make it softer. It's much more difficult according to the Rashi on the Rif.
There is a difficulty in that the Gemara is missing out a step, but I don't know why you're raising that difficulty as part of the Havamina Maskana. The Havamina was your potter because your aim is to harden the wood. Kamash Malan, that in the meantime it's softening, and rushing the Rif with Adam, and therefore drawing out the water and boiling the water. There is maybe this will make it a little easier. There is a Mefurish Rishon who learns like this. And I didn't print the Rishon, I just printed the Shulchan Aruch below Rashi. The Shulchan Aruch in Simon Shin Aleph, Sif Mem Vav, says that Begodim Ashruim B'mayim, Osun and Nagvam Samach Leish. Clothes which are sopping wet with water, you're not allowed to dry them at the fire. Now the source of this is a Modchai, and the Modchai says this very chiddush that we've just been discussing, that drying clothes involves evaporating the water, and evaporating the water involves heating the water, and therefore there's bishul through heating the water. And the Mordechai
reality,
says, you know what my raya is? My raya is from Haiman de Shata Sichsa Latuna to Chayv Mishum Mevashel. So he brings out Gemara as proof that drying clothes of water through evaporating the water is called bishul. So it seems to me that Mordechai is another Rishon who's going with this way of reading the Gemara. I appreciate it involves adding in an extra stage in the Gemara. The point isn't the softening of the wood. The point is that the softening of the wood means that the water is being drawn out, and therefore the melacha really is the boiling away of the water as opposed to the softening of the wood.
Can I ask about the boiling of... Sorry. Boiling what you've mentioned, sort of boiling water, seems very different. The bishul or the offer or whatever we're talking about, you start off with a raw, inedible something, and then you actually change its substance. When you heat water, you start with cold water, you end up with hot water. But if you leave it off the flame again, you get cold water again. It's not the same as cooking something, which can never go back to being raw.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that shortly. What you've just said is correct. There's two. Let me just unpick what you said, because you said two svaras in one. Water is unusual in that it doesn't make a change in the body of the water, just the heat up the temperature of the water. It doesn't change the texture of the water in the same way as cooking raw chicken into cooked chicken does. And the second point is it's reversible. We're not going to really dwell at great length on these points, though I will touch on them shortly. But that you are correct, and this opens a whole issue in Hilchos Shabbos about heating water. This is where the whole issue of heating water comes from, or liquids in general. Normally we say ein bishul acha bishul. Once something's cooked, it's cooked. Whereas with water, it's not that simple.
Could I ask you, when you've got this, either the peg whose water is evaporating or the clothes whose water is evaporating, they're not reaching hayat soledet bar.
Actually, the water is reaching above yad soledes, presumably. Otherwise, there wouldn't be there wouldn't be this melacha over here.
I don't understand that. I thought what happens is as you warm something up, the equilibrium changes between the wet thing and the air around, and it's evaporating away long before it's reaching hayat soledet bar. So as an example, if you put clothes near a fire to dry off, right, the clothes never get hayat soledet bar hot if you touch them. They're drying out because that's how evaporation works.
I believe that there's 2 points over here. The first thing is I believe the poskim and the Shulchan Aruch spell out that we have to be talking about a yad soledes situation over here. In terms of the physics of it, I as far as I remember from my high school physics, what you're saying is correct, and it's possible to evaporate heat water without it reaching yad soledes. But I believe it's equally possible if you heat it up fast enough that it will reach yad soledes. Having said that, though, I'm saying this from memory. So if we can put this on hold, and I will maybe you can dig me up an article about this, and I'll try and Google it. Also, and we'll check what the science of the matter is. But the post can spell out that we're talking here where it becomes yad soledes. If it doesn't, then you would be correct. Then this would be a problem. If it turns out that the science is that it can never become yad soledes, then we're in a mess. And this will be a sugya that we need to work out how it fits in with the science in this reading of the sugya.
Can I ask, do any of the Mefarshim discuss the idea of edible and inedible from the point of view that Ofeh, the paradigm, is a piece of bread that you eat, and bishul is simamanim, which are inedible, even though bishul has got edible things as well. But is that discussed?
Yeah, we'll come to something similar to that discussion shortly. Yeah. Okay, so this is the second way of reading the sugya. That what's going on in the sugya is the bishul of the water. There is a third way to read the sugya, which I also printed in the Mara Makomis, which is the Rambam in Perik Tes Halacha Vav. And the Rambam there says a number of scenarios, including melting. Well, let's read the Rambam together. Let's just learn a piece of Rambam together. The Rambam says Hamatich Perik Tes Halacha Vav. Hamatich echon mimini matches. Culture, if you melt metal. Or you heat metal till it glows. How is that told as Mevashel? V'cheinam masis adonag es a chelev, or es a zephes, v'akofa, v'agofis, or kiyot mehem. These are all scenarios in which you melt fats and pitch and tars and other things like this. This is a told on Mevashel and Chayiv. Let's not go into that now. Then he says, v'cheinam Mevashel kliyadoma. If you cook, interesting language, if you cook an earthenware utensil, achiyasa cheres, till it becomes clay, so you put it in the kiln, you bake it in the kiln, chayiv mishum mevashel, you chayiv because of mevashel. Klolo shel davar, bein streifas guf kosher be'eish, whether you fire or burn a hard body in fire, o shehiksha guf rach, or you, am I misreading? Bein sheripa guf kosher be'eish, whether you soften a hard body in fire, o shehiksha guf rach, or you harden a soft body, how is a chayiv mishum mevashel, you're chayiv because of mevashel. Now, where does the Rambam get this scenario from of baking in the kiln? So the Maggid Mishnah, which I printed also, says this is how Rashi learned, the Rambam learnt, Haiman, the Shoda, Sichsa, chayiv mishum mevashel. This is how the Rambam learnt the Gemara. Now, when I saw this Maggid Mishnah, I thought this was a piece of speculation on the Maggid Mishnah's part. In other words, he's suggesting maybe they had some tradition that this is how the Rambam translates Haiman de Shoda Sichsa, that throwing the sichsa into the fire, into this oven, is really throwing a clay utensil into the kiln. Subsequent to preparing the Maramakomas, in fact, just now, a couple of hours ago, when I was reading the Sugya, I looked at Rabbeinu Chananel, and I saw that Rabbeinu Chananel brings this very pshat in the Gemara. And Rabbeinu Chananel says as follows. I'll post it on the WhatsApp group later, the Maramakim, for those who don't have the Rabbeinu Chananel in the Gemara. So he says, Perish anoisin yoseidas lachem mekivshon, if you put pegs into the oven, liyavshon, to dry them, etc. That's one pshat. Perish l'shur lechazik, to strengthen it. Then he says, v'yesh mishom, there's an alternative reading, sichsa hein glal behema, dakikin, hitzilon lekivshon, mashachai mishum mave harichayev, v'oidchai mishum mevashel. So the second Mashat is, he says, we're talking about dung kalim. So they used to bake utensils with the dung of animals. And the dung of animals, if you throw in the oven, you harden it and it becomes a clay-like utensil. It's not very appetizing, but that's how they used to make it. He says, what's the chiddush? The lo tema ein kli cheres mevashel neisha machzik hakli. Baking a kli cheres is not mevashel because it's hardening it. Ashmin on Demipa, it's telling us that you're chayiv because it softens. So the continuation of the Rabbeinu Chananel is a little unclear to me. But either way, Rabbeinu Chananel learns such a pshat that the explanation of the Gemara is baking a utensil in the kiln and hardening it through so doing. That's the melacha. He says it's a case of a dung utensil. The Rambam says it's a case of a clay utensil. But either way, baking it in the kiln is the melacha of Mevashel, according to the Rambam. And it's actually very nice that this is a pshat of Rabbeinu Chananel, because Rabbeinu Chananel and the Rambam came from the same base of Medrash. The Rambam was a somewhat of a Talmud of Rabbeinu Chananel, and therefore it's always appealing to see a Rabbeinu Chananel and a Rambam learning being on the same page in how they learn the Gemara. And here Rabbeinu Chananel brings this as one pshat that Yesh Mish Omer. It was a known pshat floating around, and evidently the Rambam adopted this opinion.
I thought there was a difference between the Rambam and Rabbeinu Chananel. The Rambam was saying, whichever way round it is, making something hard or making something soft, you're going to be chayev. But Rabbeinu Chananel is only saying you're chayev only because it goes through a softening process.
I think that is correct, and I want to spell that out. And that's why I said I don't quite know what to do with the last line of the Rabbeinu Chananel, because now we have another question on the Rambam, which is, okay, this is how the Rambam learns that baking in a kiln is enough to make you chayev. But why are you chayev? What's the melacha over here? After all, you took a soft keli of clay and you made it into a hard kli. So there's two ways to jump here. Route number one is that the Rambam holds he disagrees with Rashi and the other assumptions of the Gemara, and the chiddush is gufa that hardening is also something that makes you chayiv. It's not just softening that makes you chayiv. Hardening is also something that makes you chayiv. The alternative way of reading the Rambam, which I think is more difficult in the Rambam, but no less than the Shahat Tzion, the footnote on the Mishnah Berurah, learns this, and I printed here the Mara Mekomis. I printed here the Mishnah Berurah source 4, and the Sha'at Sion in Sif Cotton Dalad learns that Pshat in the Rambam, the reason why you are chayav for hardening this clay utensil, is because it first becomes softened and then becomes hardened in the kiln process. So there's two ways in brief of reading the Rambam. Either, again, just to summarize, first of all, the Rambam has a different pshat in the Gemara, and in that he's like the second pshat on Rabbeinu Chananel, that we're not talking about hardening a peg, we're talking about hardening a clay utensil. And that the second point in the Rambam is what's the lomdus. What seems to me the easier reading in the Rambam is that the Rambam argues and holds that hardening is also the melacha of bishul. But you could be madcha the Rambam, and this for some reason is how the Mishnah Berurah learns, and say the Rambam also means really the same as how we read in Rashi, that the reason you're chayav for hardening it is because it goes via a softening process. Now, I'm not enough of an expert on kiln making to know whether the clay keli softens before it hardens in the kiln. But anyway, this is how the Mishnah Berurah seems to learn the Rambam. According to the Mishnah Berurah, then the Rabbeinu Chananel is the same as the Rambam, because Rabbeinu Chananel also seems to spell this out. He seems to say, like what I just said in the Rambam, or the Mishnah Berurah just said in the Rambam, he seems to say the reason you're chayav is because it first initially softened before it hardened. The simplest reading in the Rambam and the continuation of the Rambam is that the Rambam disagrees, and the Rambam holds you're chayav for hardening as much as for softening. So to summarize, we potentially have three readings in the Gemara. Reading number one is our Rashi, who says that the melacha is softening, which happens before the hardening. The second reading is the Rashi on the Rif, who seems to say, I think, that the boiling away, the evaporating of the water is the melacha. And the third reading is the Lechem Mishnah's reading, at least to the Rambam, who says, no, hardening is also the melacha of bishul. Now, just to show how things can be turned on their head, I printed a Chasam Sofer, which I came across last time when I was preparing the sources, and the Chasam Sofer seems to turn our Rashi in front of us on the page into Rashi on the Rif. So if we ask ourselves, where did this anonymous compiler of Rashi in 13th century Germany get Rashi on the Rif from? According to the Chasam Sofer, the answer is because that's what Rashi on the Gemara says. So we're going the opposite extreme. Paul was bothered by Rashi on the Rif, meaning boiling away the water. The Chasam Sofer learned Rashi on our Gemara as referring to boiling away the water. And the Chasam Sofer learns that Rashi on our Gemara is talking about a metal peg, not a wooden peg. And it seems that when you want to, there's a word for it, when you want to toughen metal, you dip it in water and then you put it on the flame, and then you dip it in water and then you put it on the flame, and that toughens the metal. And this is some sort of blacksmith who's doing this process. And the Chasam Sofer, I think, if I read the Chasam Sofer correctly, I'd be interested to hear how you read the Chasam Sofer. The Chasam Sofer seems to learn that Rashi is talking about such a metal peg, which you're strengthening by melting and smelting and so on, and water gets evaporated off it in the process. I actually once went to see a blacksmith at work, and I saw that there's a lot of water around. They keep on dipping things into water, and the water gets boiled away, and that's the melachot of bishul that takes place. Now this I really struggle with, because why then, in this reading, what does the Gemara mean when it says mir parapi, that you're softening something? The point isn't the softening of the metal. I mean, the metal may get softened by heating it because it maybe slightly melts or something. The point is not the softening of the metal at all. The point is the water that gets evaporated off the metal. Now, if it means, like Rashi on the Rif, that water is produced through the softening of the wood, and therefore the wood exudes water, and that water then gets evaporated, then at least you have a reading. Maybe it's a difficult reading in the Gemara. Josh and Paul raise difficulties with how you read this in the Gemara, but it's a possible reading in the Gemara, that the Gemara is saying you soften the wood, and therefore the wood produces water, and the water gets evaporated away, and that's the bishul. According to the Chasam Sofer, that's simply water sitting on top of the metal. I really don't know how you read mir parapi, but I just found it interesting that the Chasam Sofer reads Rashi very difficult to our assumptions. I came into Rashi assuming Rashi was talking about wood. The Chasam Sofer understands Rashi talking about metal, and therefore he learns that it's the water which is used in the process, which is somehow evaporated, and therefore the Rashi on the Gemara is very similar to Rashi on the Rif. So we have a very shifting landscape over here about who lines up with which position. In brief, we have three models in the Gemara. Either it's the softening of the words, or it's the water that's evaporated, or it's the hardening. Who holds which model isn't clear. Rashi on the Gemara maybe means what Rashi on the Rif meant, in which case Rashi on the Gemara is also model number 2, and the Rambam on the according to the reading of the Mishnah Berurah might be model number 1. So it's confusing to know how to line up the views, but anyway, it comes out that there are 3 ways of reading the Gemara based on these sources that we've seen.
Rabbi Zobin, could you be, I mean, I know just to throw something else in, why is there not any problem with being matakein the kli as well here in terms of a malacha on the actual kli which you've thrown into the oven?
Why is it not some sort of makib patish or something like that?
Yes, that's what I was thinking, yeah, some sort of thing like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Rach seems to say, and this also lines up well with the view of the Rambam, that there is also another malacha here of mavir, because by making the metal glowing hot, red hot, there's a mavir, there's a creating of a new fire that takes place, because you turn the metal into a flame of sorts. That's why it glows red hot, it gives off electrons, it becomes a flame of sorts. In which case there's a second malacha. It may be that when there's other potential malachas, then makib patish doesn't come into play. Makib patish is only when there's no other malacha at work. Otherwise, every time you do any malacha, you're also always doing a makib patish by producing what you're producing. So when you weave a garment, why are you just chayiv because of weaving? Why isn't it makib patish? Because you produced a mat or a cloth or something like that. Or when you sew something and you complete the shirt. So it seems that when it's another malacha, by definition, it excludes makib patish. Now, if the malacha is the softening and hardening of the words, maybe that would be an answer to the question. If the malacha is in the mayim, then why aren't you also chayiv because of what you do in the utensil? And I don't know the answer to that question. Okay, so these are the 3 readings of Gemara. I just want to use the few minutes available to try and just make a couple more points. The first point is this whole assumption, and this someone mentioned this last year, this whole assumption that the malacha of bishul is softening, not hardening, is difficult. It's difficult because we do find examples of bishul when you harden food, and the 2 examples that spring to mind are baking of bread and boiling an egg, cooking an egg. Cooking an egg is a Gemara earlier on, I think that's Lamed Ches. And the second, so those are 2 examples in which we see bishul is hardening. And then there is a classic bishul in which the substance is neither hardened nor softened, and this is water. This is mayim, which I think Edward was Edward mentioned water earlier.
Martin.
Sorry.
Martin.
Yeah. So this is the bishul of mayim, where there's no change to the substance at all. So this idea that somehow bishul is only connected with a specific change in state of the item being cooked is very difficult. You could argue, by the way, that at least with, not with water, but maybe with the other 2 examples of bread and egg, you could argue that enochanami, the reason you're chayiv there is not for the hardening of the bread and the egg, but the softening process that happens prior to the hardening. And as the same numbers as the Gemara, that the bread and the egg get softened first before hardening, which is a fact. I mean, before it hardens, it becomes a little bit more liquid because it begins bubbling away and so on. The water in it begins bubbling away. And therefore, the softening that takes place before the hardening is what makes you chayiv as opposed to the hardening. I was just mulling this over. I mean, there may be then enough gemina la halacha. What happens if you cook it? It sort of turns everything a bit on its head. I want to go into the whole of Masechet Shabbat at this point. But we discuss what's the sheer bishul that counts as bishul, and it would, how much does something have to be cooked? And the Gemara talks about machal ben josai, that has to be a third cooked or half cooked, which is another way of saying barely edible. That's already enough to make you chayiv on bishul. But in this case, what the point actually, it would turn out that if you had an egg in which you had done all the softening but none of the hardening, you managed to catch it just at that Goldilocks zone, in which the egg had softened but not yet hardened, or the bread had softened but not yet hardened, you would already be chayiv because of the liquid content which is being boiled and softened. So I just don't really know what to make of that. But it seems clear, at least in the view of the Rambam, that there are 2 separate melachos floating around over here. There's an Av and a Tolda. And that's the reason why I printed the Rambam in Perek Tes Halacha Aleph, and then the Rambam in Perek Tes Halacha Vav afterwards. because in Perik Tes Halacha Aleph, the Rambam is clearly talking about the Av Melacha, and in the Av Melacha, the Rambam says the Melacha is making the food edible. That's Perik Tes Halacha Aleph, and in Perik Tes Halacha Vov, the Rambam talks about Mateches, and in Halacha Zayin, he also talks about this being a tolda of Mevashel. So both in Halacha Vov and Halacha Zayin, he talks about this being these being toldas, not others. So it would appear that the Rambam is learning that there's an Av and a tolda. The Av Melacha is food, and with food, it's not about the changing of the physical state, whether it's hardening or softening and hardening, or neither change, such as with water. The point is changing the edibility of it. It's true that with water it's reversible, but so what? Nonetheless, when you heat it, you change it qualitatively from being a cold liquid to a hot liquid, and that's enough for bishul. And then when it comes to the tolda of bishul, which is with other things like kilns and hardening kalim and metalwork and other such things, there the tolda of bishul is to do with the state as opposed to the functionality. And it would turn out then that some ammonim, which are also not food, that's another ko-av, because again you're producing a functionality as opposed to a change of state, and therefore the melacha would be the change of functionality as opposed to the change of state. So this is an attempt at reading the Gemara according to these shittas, and I think this is a good way of reading the Rambam. There is, by the way, another, just one final point. I know I'm going over time, but I just want to finish this point. It's possible that what's also going on in the Rambam is that the question over here is that the Rambam is bothered by the fact that throwing into the oven is not a significant enough melacha to make you chayiv, because you're merely hardening it, even though it's already cooked, and that's why the Rambam says that you aren't chayiv. That's why the Rambam needed to come on to hardening it. This is how I should have mentioned. This is also part of how the Lechem Mishnah reads the Rambam. The Lechem Mishnah says that really you're chayiv for hardening things also. As we said, the Rambam learns that any change of state is enough to make you chayiv. Why does the Gemara say that you have hardened it? In other words, I would have said that you're not doing any melacha at all, because it's already strong beforehand. It's already hard. It's a clay utensil. A clay utensil is hard just by drying, even without kiln baking it, and you're merely strengthening it. And if it tells you you're chayav even for baking it in the kiln, because it first got softened and then got hardened. So this is how the Lechem Mishnah reads the Rambam. To summarize, it would appear that the simplest reading of the Rambam is that the Rambam holds that softening or hardening is enough to do the melacha, and all these details of softening and hardening are relevant in the tolda of Mevashel, which the Rambam tells us in Halacha Vov, which is to do with utensils and tar and pitch and other such things. But in the Av Melacha of Mevashel, which is about some ammonim or foods, change of state is not relevant, it's change of function which is relevant, either cooking some ammonim dyes or cooking foods. And this is how the Rambam would learn the sugya. So we'll stop there unless any questions, and move on to the second half of the sugya next year.